All right, we ready whenever you are, Princess. All right, everybody, welcome to another edition of the Leadership Blend with your host, Ricardo D. Rice, and my co-host
Simone Sheree.
and correspondent,
Cameron Wallace.
All right, so a lot going on, and here we are in February, and the crap just don't stop. Here we are thinking that the Republicans will kind of take a little seat back and kind of chill out and be like, lick their wounds. No, they on the battlefield diligently trying to change things that we probably would not be paying attention to. But thank God for the Leadership Blend, because we're gonna shine a light on it. But we're gonna start with we're gonna fly on over to Texas and get the scoop about what's going on there. So Cam, explain to us what's going on in Texas.
So mainly the blackout in Texas is being caused by the extreme cold and the winter storm that's been sweeping from like the New England area down to Texas. And the biggest issue about the whole blackout is that, for one, there's no electricity, which means there's no heat during this big winter storm. And then the infrastructure in Texas is not built to actually sustain winter colds like this, to actually sustain like winter storms. So a lot of people are being, displaced out of their homes because their homes are literally freezing. They have no insulation built into them because it's expected to be hot all the time. So this whole situation is really problematic because it shows why it's important that we have some type of Green New Deal, or we have some type of reform in or any bill that plans out what climate control looks like and what sustainability actually looks like for Texas.
Well, they have their own, so they have their own, power grid thing, right? Theirs isn't, connected, because I read something saying they have their own, power grid, and it's not connected to anything else. It's it's a standalone type thing. So I was disturbed by it. I was like, how does that happen?
I still don't know how that would have changed the fact that it's low temperatures that are the primary cause. I still don't, because, again, it's like they're just in a situation they've never been in before, and we know what happens all the time Atlanta's in that situation. But, a quarter of the state, looking at some of the pictures on Twitter about what the residents are going through was crazy. Seeing the frozen toilet bowl water and
pipes bursting
and
flooding,
are, literally frozen. There are icicles hanging off places.
A quarter of the population is under official order that they have to boil all their water before they can even touch it or use it for anything. They have to boil all their water. So it's I think the blackouts are definitely having a huge impact, and they've got Texas is a huge state, period. But some of their cities as well, I think, are just, you see the grocery store shelves and all these big major grocery stores in Austin and in Houston and in Dallas, and the shelves are just empty. It's this is what we thought COVID was going to be in terms of the living conditions and everything being out and you just being stuck and left to your own devices. That's what they're actually going through. And it's crazy watching people in stores in line with their phones trying to use their lights because there's no lights.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's my question. I'm gonna let you finish, but I guess my question is, can we be mad at this? It's like when it happened in Atlanta, we had Snowgeddon. It was and they were not prepared. Snowgeddon, and they were not prepared for it, so they didn't have the right trucks. If you live in an area that's not prone for these kinds of things to happen, are we really entitled to be mad? Because if it's always a certain type of weather and this is an actual fluke, can we really be mad? I guess that's my question. I'm not downgrading or anything. I'm asking from a humanistic, city should be responsible for these things standpoint. If you've never, it's when it happened in Atlanta, it was we've never had that. It's
always about the response.
Yeah, it really is about the response, because they could very well have provided, the trucks to put salt on the roads so that people would be able to travel back and forth. They could have provided, Texas could be doing more as a state. Texas really could be doing more especially for the homeless that are in the area, because dozens of people have died since this blackout. People are not able to drink clean water because there are parasites in the water, and the filtration systems are not working because of electricity. It's affecting more than just heat in Ted Cruz's home. So,
so we really, you might as well segue to that too. Make sure you cover that too.
Okay, so
good point.
I don't have a problem with Ted Cruz fleeing the country.
All right, so who is Ted Cruz, for those that don't know? Who is Ted Cruz?
He is the U.S. Senator for Texas. And I have no problem with Senator. If it was me, if the shoe was on my foot, if I was living in Texas, I personally, and I had the means to go to Cancun spontaneously, hey, I would book the same flight.
No, I'm not going either one of y'all on this
As
one.
a leader of your country, it just kind of puts out a bad image of you because you're someone who, is supposed to lead this country, and everybody does not have the resources to just be able to get up and go to Cancun.
Does he live in Texas?
But the first thing, I mean, he has a residence. I'm sure he has many properties.
Yes, I'm sure he lives.
U.S. senators are very wealthy individuals, but yes, that's his home state. So, but what's crazy is like the juxtaposition, right? It's the way that it looks because you've got somebody heading to Cancun, and then they got all those pictures of those homeless people under the bridges in Texas. So they're just like bone chilling. You've got like families with all their kids, if they've got lots of them, in a car because it's warmer, as opposed to trying to be in their home and be cold. Like they're just huddled together in the car. So it is really crazy for Texas, especially. It's just crazy.
I mean, okay, so when it comes to the homeless, this is a problem in general. So, I mean, if that were to happen in Atlanta, you'd have that same problem with the homeless because it's just not something states focus on. They just don't. I mean, I saw some warming centers that they opened up, but those aren't really designed for the homeless in this particular time. It's designed for everybody. Yeah. So the homeless is always an issue. Like I said, even when it happened here, it was an issue. So I don't know.
But maybe there'll be less climate change deniers. Maybe this is unique enough of an event, like this cold wave, that there will be less deniers.
I mean, what are we accrediting
Hopefully
it to?
someone will show. Well, I mean, we should accredit
the winter storm.
Yeah, to the winter storm. All these effects are happening from the winter storm, but the winter storm is affected by climate change. Well, climate change has caused this winter storm, and I feel like that is the apparent conclusion here. Like, and I feel like if you kind of don't see it, you're kind of like one of the deniers that won't support, like,
please. When we had that tsunami that like swept that city, people still, and even though it probably was caused by global warming, nobody wanted to. They was like, well, that's just a fluke, It destroyed a city. It was a tsunami. Like, when have you ever seen it? There will be people who will say this is a fluke and so on and so forth. I think the only way you could get the naysayers is it would have to happen consecutively someplace else. Like, if this were to happen someplace else just like this that's not accustomed to it, then you'd be able to say, see, this is right on the heels of the other one.
Texas is such a peculiar place to have like such a big winter storm. That's not normal for Texas at all. Like, I could see if we were talking about Denver, something like that, someplace where it snows,
or even Oregon, which they did have. So some places it's less alarming. Oregon isn't making the news really right now, even though they had the same situation.
And not only that, areas in Maine are not like covered in snow like Texas is right now, and that should show that it's very problematic. Look how close Texas is to the equator compared to some places in like the New England district.
I don't think a lot of people really understand what global warming is. Honestly, if we really dig down to, I don't think people understand what that is.
But I also go ahead.
From what I understand about it is the greenhouse gas emissions that we're releasing into the air are, basically putting holes in the ozone layer, which is allowing too much sunlight and deadly chemicals and stuff like that. That's just from learning about science and how, I guess, the greenhouse gases actually affect the climate. Mm-hmm. There's a lot in between that process that I don't quite understand, though.
For sure, and I'm not even going to pretend to. But as an overview, like some of the like hiccups basically that happen from that exact source is that there'll be random heat waves, random cold waves. Mm-hmm. It throws off and it causes changes in temperature that cause other sorts of situations. So like, even though California's always had wildfires and they've always had issues with droughts and those sorts of things, like that stampede of them that we saw for all those years for 18 and 19 and how devastating they were, like the extremity of already pretty extreme weather is heightened. And that's my understanding. And that there's just really random, unexplainable situations, which are probably like the tsunami that you're talking about. So, but that's a really good topic for, I think, another day. I was just being so grateful, and I'll look at Texas, but I was literally just saying, like, we're almost out of February now, which means that we're probably not going to get any snow, because I know that, like, Virginia and all those other states were getting a lot of snow, and I was like, oh, God, please no snow here. Every time there's snow here, it's such a problem.
Man,
we didn't get any.
You do realize that in Atlanta, the weather changes every day. So before you get excited about that, before you say that, knock on wood, before you say that.
It would be so random if it happened now when it's almost
literally
March.
2 weeks ago, it was 30 degrees. I wake up the next day, it is 80 degrees.
Yeah.
So you really want to rule out that snow could happen in Atlanta at this point?
Okay, I take it back, universe. I take it back.
As bipolar as Atlanta weather is. Like, But the Green Deal thing. So you were getting into the Green Deal, and
Yeah.
people were saying, so what was that about? Like,
So the Green New Deal, basically, it just reduces, well, its goal is to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions in order to kind of like avoid the consequences of climate change, which we're experiencing now in Texas. So it basically just converts us over to cleaner energy, less fossil fuels, things like that, so that we're actually protecting the planet, and so that the ozone layer can continue to protect us from the UV rays and stuff like that. So there's a lot that goes into it. And it is a long process because just reducing those emissions won't necessarily have an immediate effect. But over time, we see how the greenhouse gases have caused problems for us. So hopefully by limiting those and reducing those, that can kind of reverse some of the problems that we're having. And we won't have to worry about a winter storm in the middle of February.
So the governor is getting a lot of flack for that because he's made so many, this is Governor Greg Abbott, has made so many comments about the Green New Deal and then and about our just necessity for fossil fuels and all this stuff. But Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, was quoted today. If you have a chance to read the Washington Post article, read that. There's a big opinion piece about how the storm is making the case for that New Deal, and how the governor is just fighting that insinuation tooth and nail and just could not want to hear it any less. So
I mean, it's weird because when I think about being in high school, which was 93 to 97. Don't judge my life. I am that old. We've been talking about this since then. And they were predicting that in 20 years, this major catastrophe would happen because then they were saying the ozone layer was being eaten away by our gases and all that good stuff. So to fast forward, 20, almost 30 years, and to just now seeing this kind of stuff, that's probably another reason the naysayers are like, well, y'all been saying this, for decades, and it still has yet to happen. So who's to say that this is exactly why?
Yeah, and here we are facing the consequences.
They will say the same thing.
One isolated incident. I mean, again, if it happened, it would have to happen consecutively to be able to make a strong case for the naysayers. I'm just saying.
This just goes to show that preventative measures are better than trying to counteract something like this.
Exactly.
Something with the environment, something that we only have one of, something so valuable. We should have been trying to prevent this, not necessarily trying to combat it. So that's definitely poor leadership.
But we talking about money too. Nobody wants to put money into
but
something.
I love how much this generation is concerned about this issue because even mine, I feel like has completely neglected it. So I just love that this is a priority for the kids.
Well, that's because they tree huggers. They little tree huggers.
Let's go to the next.
They're little tree huggers. There's nothing wrong with being a tree hugger.
You only get one Earth. You only get one body. You only get one Earth. Why not take care of them to the
Revelation
best
says
of?
something quite different, but we'll move on from that.
You
I don't
really?
want to have the
Really? We going there?
There will be a new heaven and a new Earth.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna
after
hop
the
on
earth
this
is
front.
after the earth is purged.
I'm saying
Yes.
I kind of want to see this one prosper though.
Well,
You do realize that we are not
I
talking
do
about
as well.
water this time. We're talking about being purged with fire.
Absolutely.
That is not exactly something that I want to think about.
well,
Because
it's on its way. He's on his way.
what I'm not about to do with you is this, because that starts a whole other conversation.
It does.
I'm not getting
I'm
into
trying
with
to
you.
get off this topic because it gets into religious territory for me
No,
very
yeah, I'm about to
quickly,
say for you.
and I don't want to have to do
For
that
you, but
today.
no, I'm not going there. All right, is that everything for that particular one?
Yes, that's everything.
All right.
Texas. Ted
Okay,
Cruz.
let's cover election laws, right? So fun stuff.
Foolishness.
Yes, so we talk about this at length, but there were over 30, almost 30 bills filed. I think the last time we talked about 25 or 24 in the state of Georgia. We're talking about local or state politics now. Filed for changes to Georgia's current elections process. Bills that covered drop box locations, bills that covered absentee voting, covered ID requirements, talked about deadlines and timelines and all of that sort of thing. So those bills are finally starting to have a little traction. We know that in the state, our state government is required to pass a budget every single session. If they do nothing else, they have to pass a budget. So it looks like everybody kind of collectively agreed that they're going to get that out of the way as soon as possible. And since that was passed just a little over a week ago, everything else is finally starting to move. Finally, or unfortunately, however you look at it. So several of those bills, including one that has made headlines because of Representative Barry Fleming, is HB 531. So this was introduced to the Special Committee on Election Integrity. And this bill is probably one of the most comprehensive in a sense in terms of all the things it seeks to change. So ID requirements are one of the biggest things it seeks to change. We've all been talking about absentee voting and no excuse absentee voting and how a majority of states do allow people to vote absentee with no excuse. There are a lot of measures, a lot of bills seeking to change that, seeking to require you to need a reason to vote by mail. whether that's age, disability, something else. So that's a part of this. They want individuals to have a copy of their driver's license or a state ID or something else if they're going to request an absentee ballot from the portal. Another part of these requirements are going to change the timeline with which you can request a mail-in ballot. So they are trying to limit that window to up to 11 weeks before an election or as close to 2 weeks before an election. And we're talking about mail-in voting here. So this window would become potentially that narrow. Right now, the way the law stands, you have up to 6 months before an election to request a mail-in ballot. That's a long window. It's 180 days. Right now, if this law was implemented, you would only have between 11 weeks, which is 77 days, and then 2 weeks at the latest, which is 14 days. So to go from 180 days to potentially 14 days to request a mail-in ballot is a huge difference.
Okay, so let's put this in perspective. Mm-hmm. So typically, absentee voting is typically it's more of a Republican people type thing. I've never known us to really get into
but we know
absentee ballots.
You're saying historically?
Yeah, historically. It's not something we typically think about. So I find it very interesting that all of a sudden it's become the focal point, which I'm going to assume has become the focal point because it was a major factor in Biden and a lot of people, Ossoff, Biden, Warnock, all of them kind of getting in office primarily through absentee voting. And the Republicans were shocked that it was primarily us using it. So I'm assuming that's why this all-out attack is happening on this.
A lot of Democrats in our state legislature have said that same thing, that when a lot of these mail-in voting laws were implemented, they were under Republican leadership, that there was their bills, that they wanted to extend the window and give people more time and all that stuff. So it's unquestionably just incredibly reactionary. There are some comments that have been made by a few folks about how, we always review our systems to some extent and see how we can make them better or tweak them. But we're talking about 26 bills.
This is absolute scrutiny.
And we're not going to pretend that this is just a routine checkup on our voting process.
On the heels of angry folks and a mad president. So let's be very clear about this. This is not even about optics. This is reality. Like all this happens on the heels of an angry president and a mad party. So no, this is not the normal. This is absolute
Well, Republicans argue that you have to show your ID when you vote in person. So why shouldn't people have to show their ID when they vote by mail? Now, again, there was no evidence of some widespread voting fraud conspiracy. It's unsubstantiated. It has never been proven. It's never been. There's no data to back that up. Our own Secretary of State will say that he's a Republican. Just didn't happen. But so I don't know what exactly they think is going to change or what they're trying to curb. Like they're not talking about like evidence of all this duplication. I specifically remember for myself because I did request an absentee ballot thinking I would vote that way. But then like had packages delayed all year long and was like, okay, I'm not putting anything in the mail that I really care about. I was going to vote in person. They knew that. They specifically saw like, oh, you requested an absentee ballot, and I had to sign an affidavit, and it was this whole thing because I did request it. So I guess it's funny that there's already so many procedures and safeguards in process, I feel, because I did not expect them to know that I requested one because I didn't fill it out. I didn't complete it. I didn't, send it in. So it's not like it was in the mail on its way there and I was trying to double vote. Like, it stayed on my kitchen counter from the second I got it. But they knew that, and they had to like strike it and do all this stuff. So they are trying to, I don't know if this is going to be more money or more time than it's even worth, to be totally honest. But the principle of why these bills, the motive is what's upsetting, I think, a lot of Democratic voters. And these changes are really drastic changes. Again, to give someone 6 months to vote by mail is one thing. To give them 2 weeks potentially, that makes a huge difference. I don't know if I could send you a letter and you would get it in 2 weeks.
Literally.
It's unfortunately, and other pieces of this are they're trying to limit the number of drop box locations that exist. So I remember in my county there was 22 drop boxes, which is more than some counties got. Some only had a couple here and there. I think it was supposed to be based on population size, how much money wanted to be allocated or whatever. They're trying to limit those drop boxes to only early voting locations anyway. So I think I had 7 or 8 in my county of places you can go to early vote. So that would take away like literally 2/3 of the potential drop boxes, which are supposed to be convenient. The whole point of the drop box is that it's convenient for people. Not that they have to go to a voting location to actually just put something in a drop box.
Yeah. And we can clearly see that like we are in unprecedented times. So I mean, like changing things like this basically kind of insinuates that they expect nothing similar to this situation to happen in the future. And I think that just shows like kind of like a little neglect on their part, because you're like neglecting to realize that things kind of happen. I mean, no one expected COVID to happen, right? No one expected the Texas blackout to happen. So having this convenience is easy. And then I also don't understand. So on the absentee ballot, you actually have to put your driver's license number on it. So like this change to actually having a photo ID,
when you can't see my face anyway.
So
It's still not going to stop like somebody's spouse from filling in that information and sending it off. So it does nothing except complicate the process and increase the risk that someone will get it wrong, which means that their vote will not count. So it's just, I mean, the more complications and the more layers, it just increases the failure rate, because it doesn't make anything more secure.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's at their core, that's kind of what we're looking at. Anything I think they feel like, and this we're probably guilty of it, because I know I'm like that. I think this notion that inconvenience will stop our mobility is at the core of this. The ideology that the more hoops we have to jump through, especially black folks, when it's already hard enough to get most of them to vote because they feel like it doesn't matter. It's like, if I'm inconvenience them enough, they'll get distracted or they'll get discouraged and won't do it anyway. So I feel like that's at the core of this is, move all the drop boxes. Now they find a printer to make a copy of their ID to put in this absentee and find a box to send it off. It's like, even with the gerrymandering thing, if we can make it inconvenience for them to find a place to go to, they probably won't do it.
And again, how many people have a scanner? Do you have a scanner? You have a scan. No. Who's going to be scanning their license and putting it in a mail? People increasingly don't have stamps.
They make
don't have envelopes. Don't have scanners.
They make apps that you can scan it.
But how am I going to put a piece of paper on an envelope with my phone?
Oh, that's true too.
And that's just to apply to receive the ballot.
Right.
Apply to receive the ballot. The ballot hasn't even come yet. So it's just like,
exactly. It's a little.
It's disgusting. That's what it is. It's disgusting. And the fact that we've gotten to a point where they're this blatant with it is disgusting. So if any African Americans out there or people of color have ever questioned people's motives and have been looking for a good case study to look at, here you go.
Yeah.
It's the gift that keeps on giving. All this inconveniencing of a class of people just to make them not want to do something that is their right to do.
But it's not just us, which is so frustrating, because it's like a majority of older voters are Republican voters, and the fact that they're trying they're trying to limit absentee voting. I'm looking at Senate Bill 71 now, for people who are over 75 or who have a disability, physical disability, or who are out of town. I'm like 75 years old. Like, that's so interesting, because normally all laws that apply to older people apply to people who are legally considered elderly. 75 is way past the deadline in which an individual is considered elderly. You can collect
past the average life rate for an American. Like, you could possibly be.
I actually have a story on that. That actually would not have a story on that, but I digress.
You can collect Social Security at 62, 60.
Yeah, literally. Like, at least partial, I know for sure.
75 years old. It's like.
Well, I mean, okay, so that debacle that you were showing me about they moved up the hearing to 7 a.m.
Right.
Like, that's another example.
Senator Ellen Apparent gave a really, really great speech from the well about that, about how in 10 years she's never seen a 7 a.m. hearing. I have never seen a 7 a.m. hearing, and I know it because that would be so convenient for me. I'm such an early bird by nature. I loathe having to wait around till 10 o'clock till they finally get in the room and start talking about the things that are important. I've never heard of that.
I know sitting around at 7 o'clock with popcorn like, oh my God, they're getting ready to start the hearing.
I would be down there in person.
That's your love in hip hop. You're like, oh my God, 7 a.m., it's getting ready to get popping in the Senate. God, you're such a
The sad thing is nobody could do that. Nobody could watch this hearing. It was not live streamed. People requested it. They could not get access to it even beforehand. And
I mean,
anyway.
I appreciate all you nerds, but it's just hilarious to me that you all want to see a live stream in the chambers of people talking about legislation for like hours on end. I just find it. I appreciate all you guys. Jesus, what?
Anyway, the last thing I'll talk about with these election laws is a funding curb. So the same House bill we were talking about earlier seeks to prevent outside funds from funding elections or election-related activities. So, like, every county has their own way of doing things. When I was, for a brief time, consulting with Fulton County about their voter education, we thought about doing something like mobile buses to, like, help people to vote, or dropping off, like, registration forms here or there. We talked about doing, like, little pop-ups at churches and things like that. Every county kind of has their own, at least enough authority to decide that. But sometimes counties don't have a lot of money. Like, Fulton County is the most populous county. They have the biggest budgets. Cobb County has a good budget. Like, every county's not that county. Georgia has 159 of them. So all these counties don't even have like office spaces for their employees who work within that county facility. And for those purposes, a lot of outside funds, like I think like Rock the Vote used to be really, really big. Now
that was the bomb.
Yeah, now there's other ones, but essentially it's a bill trying to stop any outside funds. So anything that's not state money from funding the elections. So if you future you wanted to call and say, hey, I want to make sure that y'all have enough. Let me give you $1 million so you can get some more volunteers. The poll worker desperation we were in, like we could not find enough people. Nobody wanted to do it. That's something that outside funds can say, hey, like, I want to make sure you have enough poll workers. I'll, kind of check and go through whatever hoops. This would just prevent people from doing that. So it's like,
yeah, but is that good? Isn't that like a double-headed sword, though?
Go ahead.
When I think of that, that's like a double-headed sword because it's almost like throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Because, when I think of stuff like that, I think about Republicans being really crafty and moving monies to say, well, we didn't do it from this way or we did it from that way. But at the same token, when you think about, like you were saying, mobile buses and nonprofits jumping in and say, hey, we want to make sure people get to the polls. Now you're kind of saying, no outside interference. This has to be done within the confines of this box. It can't be supported from outside. I feel like that's a two-headed sword. That kind of makes me a little nervous. I get it, but it makes me a little nervous.
I mean, I see you making the argument, but the fact that our budget is so skinty and nobody wants to beef it up and nobody wants to raise taxes and nobody wants to spend any more money on anything with regard to elections or any area, I feel like you can't do both. Like, you can't do both. Even if it's not outside, what if it's just an individual citizen or constituent? Like, what if it's the People's Party? I just feel like to say, like, listen, we're not going to raise any more money, we're not going to use any more money, but we don't want anybody else's money. I feel like you're
shooting yourself in the foot.
It's just too much. Like, we need to pick, we need to decide. So,
I mean, where do you fall?
Anyway. I always believe in outside. To me, it's a community effort. So I believe in all of that. I believe it should be traced. I believe it should be recorded. I believe it should be documented. I don't believe it should come from a party. So it can't be a partisan operation. But to the extent that like Arthur Blank or any other incredible entrepreneur wanted to just go ahead and cut a check, I have no qualms about that whatsoever.
Cam, what's your thoughts?
Same. I just feel like, like she said, it is a community effort, and at the end of the day, communities put who they want to see in office. So why can't they mobilize enough money and enough forces to be able to do that?
All right,
makes sense to me.
All right, well, this story is for you. I just realized I had this story. So
okay.
Australians who get their news from Facebook, your people, your love, will have to go elsewhere for the headlines. Facebook said on Wednesday that it was blocking people and publishers in Australia from sharing and viewing news from local and foreign outlets. The pages of fire services, charities, and politicians inadvertently got swept up in the ban too. It all stems from a proposed legislation down under that would force tech platforms to pay news publishers for content, a move that regulators in other counties could follow. Facebook argues the legislation unfairly punishes them and would break how the internet works. Google, though, appears to be going through the opposite way. Rather than leaving Australia, it seems to be deepening relations with publishers there. Thoughts?
So it looks like they're trying to force Facebook to pay
Is that such
news
a bad
publishers.
Thing? Is that such a bad thing? When you think about all that the platform that Facebook is, and
Google almost left them too. So Australia, I think, has the habit of trying to wrangle with these tech giants in a way that other countries just don't. So, but that's just a side note.
Well, I don't think that, like I said, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. When you think about the time and effort that people put in to do stuff on Facebook to get a little change going their way, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
In a sense, I feel like they're kind of trying to tackle these monopolies a little bit and kind of basically giving a little bit more credit to their local sources, because a lot of their local sources fuel, the content and the media that you see on Facebook and stuff like that. So I think they're really just trying to take more light off of, the monopolies and the big brands and the names and just kind of put it into their own publications and stuff like that.
But then they're also complaining at the same time and saying that, like, well, that's unhealthy because there's like news or like emergency reporting or whatever that like they can't share because you're blocking all news sharing.
Well, my thing is this, and I'm starting to notice it more. In my day, monopolies were not allowed in any arena. And when you really look at it, Facebook is a monopoly. Like it owns Instagram.
Let me ask you something.
No, I'm gonna finish my point. I'm gonna finish my point because I know what you're gonna. I'm gonna finish my point. When you look at Facebook, Facebook is a monopoly. It has brought Instagram. Yeah. Who can rival Facebook at this point? We were never designed to have monopolies because monopolies are dangerous. Case in point, and you're not even gonna argue that. We were never designed to have monopolies.
I'm just trying to let you finish. That's why I'm not arguing.
We are not supposed to have monopolies, and Facebook is a monopoly. You cannot do anything as it pertains to social media without going through Facebook.
That is not true.
What else can you use that rivals Facebook?
So first, let me ask you some questions.
Oh God.
Do you have Parler on
No.
your phone?
No. I don't even know what that is.
When did you join the Clubhouse?
I don't have Clubhouse.
So there are continuously
And Clubhouse is
newly
pale.
released.
Actually, no.
Newly
Before
released-
you
hold
move,
up.
wait. Before you move on that one,
Do you see
Clubhouse.
this? Do you see
Clubhouse
this?
is limited in its distribution because if you don't have an iPhone, you can't even get on Clubhouse.
Who don't have a anyway? So,
I don't. That's who.
So
I don't.
So-
and actually, y'all love to make this
That is
argument.
not our
The
fault.
last time I checked, when it came to market share, Apple was not winning. Droid was. So y'all love to say that, but the
And yet
facts
you
do
can't
not
get
support.
on-
The facts do not support
And yet you can't
that
get
Apple
on
is
the
a monopoly.
Clubhouse.
I don't care about Clubhouse. Actually, from
We
what
pay
I've seen
for
from Clubhouse,
quality,
really,
not quantity. And
That's
market
what we
shares.
doing?
We pay for quality.
again, the reality is there
okay,
are
but
more
what about
Droid
what
users.
about TikTok?
What about TikTok?
So you are keeping Facebook a monopoly because you are not branching out and exploring the other social media platforms
TikTok-
that do exist.
TikTok does not do what Facebook does. TikTok is for
TikTok is
music.
increasingly
It's
doing
funny.
everything that
It is.
Facebook
And
does, and more
everybody-
than what Facebook
Oh,
can
please.
do. And there are plenty of grown people on TikTok
Yeah.
making
Yeah, dancing around.
money.
Yeah, dancing
no,
around, making
no,
videos.
doing education as well. There's
Exactly.
also
Oh,
educational
I have learned
content.
So much stuff from
please.
TikTok.
There's educational
Y'all are-
content.
y'all
All
are
kind of
stretching.
hacks.
Anything
I'm
you
so
see-
serious.
On the level that Facebook is.
Any influencer on Instagram, for whatever you go to Instagram for, you can go to TikTok for and more.
Exactly.
Like there's
and they'll
plenty.
be more
Instagram-
popular on TikTok
Yeah.
than they actually will be on
Instagram and
and
TikTok.
the ability to earn for an entrepreneur.
Oh,
it's,
please.
it's much bigger on TikTok, much bigger.
TikTok and Instagram are not even on the same level as Facebook. Y'all not even gonna make that case right now because it's not working.
The only reason
It's
why
true.
Instagram isn't on the level as Facebook is because they were bought out by Facebook.
Yeah, seriously.
And
Instagram
in
still
order
doesn't do the
to
same
keep
thing
the
that Facebook
status,
does.
you actually have to. But in order to keep the brand of Facebook,
What
they
does
had
it
to
do?
deteriorate the brand of Instagram.
Okay, let
Because
me
at the
let
end
me
of the
let me
day,
go ahead and
You
poke
can't have
holes.
two competitive companies,
Let
like
me
two
poke
competitive
holes in this
brands in the
crap.
same company.
Let me poke holes in this crap. When you look at Instagram, there are a lot of things Instagram cannot do that Facebook can do. One, if I put up a picture and I decide I want to put a caption with a hyperlink in it, I can't do that on Instagram because you can't just click it and go to something. You can put it in the caption, but you can't click it and go to it.
You
can
could,
do that on How?
you could if you
How?
had a certain amount of followers, so that people could just click it. They could just actually
I can
click
do
it
that.
and go straight to where you're
I can
going.
have 2 followers on Facebook and still achieve that
That
objective.
doesn't mean it's better.
That is one major
That
thing.
means it's less exclusive.
That is one major
which means
thing.
it is not
Y'all
better.
are full of crap and y'all know it. Y'all are full of
But-
crap
but
and y'all
You
know
can
it.
always just say link in bio. Boom.
Old
There we
people
go.
can't even
Click
really
the-
even use the Instagram like that because it's just really
But
pictures
see,
and
that's the
stuff like
so
that.
that's what we're really
Facebook-
talking about here.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Facebook goes across the board to be able to relay information and all kinds of other stuff to different
everyone
classes,
who is
to everyone.
45 and over.
Exactly.
To everyone.
Facebook has a
Wait,
target audience,
whoa.
and so does
It's
TikTok.
not. I'm not saying that to be offensive. You know, I love Facebook. I love. Hi, Mark. I love Facebook. I have no qualms about Facebook. I never will. But there are other platforms out there. So
But they are not on the same level as Facebook. Facebook has found a way to reach every group of people, even if you're not even social media savvy. That is my point. And you're not gonna. I don't even want to use TikTok. Like it just seems like too much. I'm trying to
you need
figure
to
out
do some
how to
research.
get
'Cause
those
TikTok
videos.
is huge.
Simone, you don't even
everywhere.
use, you don't even
yes,
use
I do.
TikTok like
yes,
that.
I do.
Oh, I gotta see this.
Well, not like that.
Exactly. That's
but
what I'm saying.
But I'm on it. I'm just more of a consumer than a creator as it comes to
Yeah.
TikTok. I'm just more of a consumer.
Well, we're talking about creators. Like people.
I thought
do
we were
their
talking
church
about
services.
consumers. We're talking about
in
news
general. We're talking
consumers.
about both. We're talking about both.
So, but for people who are trying to actually build a brand, Instagram is better because
No, it's
Yes,
not.
it is. On Instagram,
Yeah.
you can actually paint an aesthetic. You can
Yeah.
actually
True.
Put,
True.
you can actually portray yourself how you want to. You can actually form an aesthetic on Instagram
Mm-hmm.
because
Instagram-
it's mostly pictures.
And-
so
which-
that content with
yes.
Facebook. I can just type whatever I want to on Facebook. It doesn't have to be a picture. It could just be my words. There's no aesthetic to it. When I look at the page,
Yeah.
it's white and blue.
Yeah.
When I look at my Instagram page, it's whatever color I painted.
Okay, that's fine.
and even if you have a specific
okay,
page type,
fine.
there's just so many
I will
restrictions.
you
let
can
on
add
it.
highlights.
It
to
doesn't
the
make
page.
I
sense
will
for
let
everybody.
you have that. On the adverse, Instagram is great if you have product. But we have moved to a customer service based industry. How are you going to promote that?
People
on
are
Instagram?
product.
Yes, you do.
People are product.
product.
You
Yes.
that's the point of a brand, is that it's a people product.
I'm not buying that.
Instagram is
Didn't make
best
sense.
for
I'm not buying
people
that.
who want to
We're
get their
talking
content
about.
out
I'm
there.
talking about the status quo. I'm not talking about
The
those that
only
are savvy
this
in
is,
social
I'll,
media.
I'll just say this, and Business Insider did a big article about this, about how obsolete Facebook will be in like T-3 years. The only reason Facebook knows this, and
They
they're
keep
already
saying
working
that.
on it.
They keep
They're already
saying
working
that,
on a
but
backup plan.
it
But
ain't-
Facebook, the only thing they actually still have that is even keeping them functional is groups. And increasingly, as more regulations come about like what content can be shared and fake news and this and that, I believe groups are going to diminish. Groups is the only thing keeping Facebook alive at this point anyway. People are no longer interested in just like mindlessly being fed with all of this crap from people who only just post these like single word questions, and like people are over it. They really are over it. It's not interactive enough. It's not engaging enough. It's not image focused. It's not video focused enough.
I still think y'all talking about,
and now
y'all aren't talking about
Instagram
the
even
status
has
quo.
a marketplace now, so the whole marketplace,
Which is
Facebook
corny.
kinda
Which
like,
Facebook Marketplace?
Which is corny.
Facebook lost so much money with trying to do Facebook Marketplace. So much money.
Yeah, I still
Nobody
don't really
uses
get
that.
one.
Okay. We can't get into this anymore. We have to go back. We have to talk really quick about this DA situation. So there was a press conference last night, which I thought was
It's gotta be when Simone calls me about something. It's gotta be serious, and she called me about it.
I was interested because so last year we all saw a handful of shootings that changed the entire year. Not only at the hands of law enforcement, but at the hands of vigilantes and individuals. And Georgia was one of those cases, which is actually incredibly unfortunate. Actually, more than one of those cases, because we forgot about Rayshard Brooks, which we should not. So there's been new district attorneys in lots of the major areas in Georgia. And we talked about this a little bit before. A lot of longtime Republican elected officials who weren't attorneys, sheriffs, court clerks, and then superior courts lost their seats to Democratic challengers, which is very challenging because 90% of people who are incumbents keep their seats in the state of Georgia, period, whether they're Democrat or Republican. It's just people who are currently elected just tend to stay. So Flynn Brody, who's a really big guest and friend of the show, did a press conference last night that I did think it was worth talking about because I don't know if everybody knew about this particular situation. He has inherited a lot of cases, not only the Ahmaud Arbery case, which we can talk more about in a second because there's been changes to citizens' arrests, but another case regarding a shooting of a 17-year-old just last year. So during this press conference, we discussed kind of the grand jury proceedings and what a grand jury, other than a trial jury, meets to determine whether or not there's enough evidence to press charges in the first place. So they typically meet in secret. The process is very different. Grand juries tend to serve over a period of time and review several cases or potential cases, which is different than a trial jury, which only is there for the one case. So in this case, the press conference was held about the death of Vincent Truitt, who was shot twice by a Cobb County police officer. This was following a July car case near Six Flags, so in the south part of the county, and he died at Grady Memorial the next day. No charges were ultimately brought against the officers, and our DA Brody specifically said that he followed the law to the letter and that there was just no reason to file those charges. There was an assistant district attorney who was also there, who talked about the fact that Vincent had a weapon. They didn't show the actual shooting in the video out of respect to the family. They showed everything that led up to that moment. They showed a little bit, I think. Did they show any after? They didn't show any after. They showed everything that led up to that moment and then put on the record and said that the grand jury was presented with everything that officers did immediately attempt to deploy life-saving support to him before the ambulances arrived. So folks had a couple questions. They were interested in it. They wanted to know, what the grand jury saw, essentially. How many videos did they see? How many photos did they see?
Well, explain how this worked, because you were telling me that the DA usually presents the charges
to the
grand jury.
Yeah, so the usual process, or at least those that we're the most familiar with, is that a grand jury, when they assemble, they meet everyone that the DA believes they need to meet with and hear from about whether or not there is evidence to go after a specific charge, sometimes multiple charges. And so they may talk to law enforcement officers, they may talk to other witnesses, whoever the DA brings before them to say, okay, this is the case, yes or no. And so they will either deliver a no bill, like I don't see it, or a true bill, like yes, file those charges. So in this case, the grand jury was presented with facts rather than a specific charge. And they determined that there was not enough to go after, for anything. So they determined that the laws were followed and that no charges should be filed. So that's what happened.
So, okay. So let me ask this, because I'm trying to frame it so that everybody gets it. So what in essence he's saying now that he wants to do is they're presented the facts and they decide whether there's enough facts to prosecute or whatever. I guess my question is, who would come up with the charges if he's not presenting the DA,
the district attorney? So you're saying in this case,
if this is the way we're going to do it moving forward, who would decide the charges? Are we expecting the jury to know what charges are and say, hey, we found him guilty of X, Y, Z? Is that what we're expecting the jury to be able to do, or just for them to say, okay, he's found guilty, now y'all find the charges? What does this look like?
So he didn't go into any more detail in this press conference about that. I don't remember. I searched the website for the district attorney a few times. I don't remember anything about this being visible on the website. I was trying to understand if it was a campaign promise at some point, and I don't think it was, or at least it wasn't bulleted that this would be a new way of going about things. I think if most people knew about it, they'd be pretty interested in it, just because usually there are specific charges that are presented, like the Breonna Taylor case is what's immediately coming to my mind. Like they presented homicide charges, which means that they have to define, what that looks like and what constitutes homicide, and or what's just negligence, or so. And it's part of the reason why some of the officers were found guilty. Were charged with some things, like the stray bullets that went elsewhere, but not the bullets that went into her apartment and killed her. So usually, I think they are presented with specific things. And even I've served on a trial jury a few times. And I know this is important because juries are laymen, for one. So, like, having a specific law to determine if there's evidence for is important. If I had to have the entire, Code of Georgia annotated, the entire criminal code in front of me before I could decide, okay, well, what's this person guilty of? We would have been there for months. I mean, so usually there's a specific charge that is being brought, and then the jury decides based on all those elements, which we usually have written out, like, do I see that? Like, is there enough evidence for that? So I don't know. I just, if you didn't get a chance to watch the press conference, I'm sure you still can, but this is one of many big cases, high-profile cases that are going to land in the laps of some of these DAs. So the Ahmaud Arbery case hasn't moved forward quite yet. There was legislation passed, speaking of, about the citizen's arrest law. We've talked about that quite a bit.
Oh, God.
Because that was invoked to protect the McMichaels for quite some time before charges were ever brought against them for several months. And so it's a very old statute. It's been on the books. Our governor was very vocal about that. Really, he has been more than once, but I think in the last couple of weeks, he made another statement about this, that we just got to get these laws off the books. And plenty of our entire legislature agrees, Republican and Democrat alike, so which is always a good thing. So that is on its way out. There will be an exception for like shopkeepers, I think, that they can arrest people if they want, if they're on their way. If they're suspected of theft, that can hold them or detain them until authorities get there. But the way the law is written now, it's that anyone can.
It's vigilante. It's vigilante all the way.
Yeah, it's just ripe for abuse and just needs to be off the books. Period. But
well, I think that's the thing that always. I say this, and I think people think I'm joking. Like, you really have to know what's still on the books. Mm-hmm. Like, because just because people aren't enforcing things doesn't mean they couldn't if they really wanted to. Mm-hmm. And this citizen arrest is one example of it. It's like the fact that you can, kind of do stuff at vigilante style and kind of be covered by the law until somebody really unravels it to get to you is dangerous, and it's crazy. And it's all about who understands what's written. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times it's not it's not us.
Yeah. So, well, it's not invoked very often, to be fair. Like, it's very rare that somebody's going to use that. And I think in part because it is such a weak defense. Like there's another case as well that I've been following really closely in Clayton County of a young woman named Hannah Payne. I think she was 19 or 20, a young white woman who chased down Kenneth Herring, who's 65 years old, and shot him when she thought that he was attempting to leave a hit and run, and she wanted to make sure that he couldn't do that. And she was on the phone with dispatch, and dispatch was telling her to stop it, that they would worry about it. The hit and run's a misdemeanor. But she pursued him anyway, and then requested that he get out of his car. And when he didn't, went back to her vehicle, obtained a firearm, and shot him and killed him.
What are we looking at? Like, what was this, a white woman and a black man?
Yes, yes. So this is in Clayton County. Judge Shana Rooks Malone has this case right now, and it has not been scheduled yet. I'm watching weekly because I'm waiting to see when that case is going on the calendar.
Again, popcorn and sitting around just waiting.
This is a huge case, but anyway, her attorneys initially did attempt to do the same thing, to call this a citizen's arrest, to say that was her attempt and that she wasn't able to get him to comply, and I don't know what went on from there, but basically whatever he was accused or suspected of doing when he drove away would have been a misdemeanor anyway, and so citizen's arrest does not apply, nor did she have anything to do with it. So it's a weak defense, and it's not used a lot, but when it is used, it always gets people very, animated. We remember Trayvon Martin really well. So the idea that I suspect you're doing something, it's always very dangerous to be the subject of somebody's suspicion, especially if that person is.
Well, we gotta keep our eyes on. We love the people that come through the show. We have to keep our eyes on and make sure, because like I told, we become the new watchdogs to make sure that things are going the right way, because we've seen this little. And you brought up a good thing for the show started. These new DAs who are in offices, we don't want it to get to a place where they're not prosecuting or they're not bringing charges and things of that magnitude.
Right.
Because it changes the game and not necessarily in a good way, because we see the same thing. We cross on over to Fulton County. We got the newly elected district attorney, Fannie Willis. She attempts to recluse herself from the Rashad Brooks case. saying that the previous administration before her had a lot of biases, so she didn't think that the venue that they were using would be congruent for trying a good case. So she sent that, and they sent it back to her and said, well, no, we don't see any bias, so you have to try this case. But the fact that it was even attempted to be sent to somebody else, it's in your district. Like, you got to assume it. Like, and you got to prosecute. You got to go. This is what you were elected to do. So we cannot try to slide our way out of these things because either it's uncomfortable or it's not something we really want to do. That's not how this works. You guys have become the new gatekeepers to make sure that justice is served. So we don't want to see this trend where people are kind of changing rules and trying not to be unbiased. Well, the people before you have been biased, and we're not telling you to be, but there's got to be another workaround. It can't be that we send these things away and we don't know whose hand it's going to end up in.
Right.
So, that we don't want to see that trend. So we're going to see what happens with Miss Willis because she's newly elected as well.
True.
But we got to prosecute these cases. Rashad Brooks was another big case as well. So we got to prosecute these cases. We can't try to find wraparounds or slide-aways to not do it. So
yeah,
we're gonna
it's
keep
important.
Our eyes. It's very important. So we're gonna keep our eyes on that kind of stuff. So this is we're just getting slapped around from both sides. We got DAs now that want to do different things.
Well, the only other. Go ahead.
Just want to be elected just to be elected. But I mean, like, I guess it's problematic for me because I know, like, when I eventually want to run for, I do want to run for office eventually, but when I do run for office, I want to be able to fulfill the role, of whatever capacity I'm in. I don't want to just run just to have a name for myself or, just get elected just to be elected, just to say that I'm a part of something. And it kind of seems like what it is right now, just to not wanting to be a part of such a, a big case like that. That would.
Well, here's what I'll say.
Family, the way that she could. Like,
a big part of this too is. And I can't really speak to the Rashad Brooks case, but I think the wave that we saw, these were individuals who in other states have been called progressive prosecutors, and there's certainly a movement to get more progressive prosecutors elected as district attorneys because being tough on crime is such the entire office is set up as one in which convictions are a source of success measurement. So getting convictions, and that has led to harsh sentencing, over sentencing for a lot of the stuff that we always talk about, at least here with marijuana. Possession or just quality of life, quote unquote, infractions or poverty crimes, which include like jaywalking or loitering or all those little things that like can result in a conviction and have really bad consequences for individuals for essentially doing no harm. And so there's this movement which is really important in which individuals are seeking to say like, listen, unless we are worried about somebody being unsafe or like a public safety risk, let's not kind of screw them up, like F them over, like put them in custody, in which case whatever job they had is gone, whatever bills they owed are behind, whatever children they had are going to have to go to the state. Like, let's not create this domino effect unless people really need to be prosecuted for something, unless they've done something really harmful, which is a great intention, but we can't also not bring charges when we need to see charges, and we can't also be afraid to press charges either. Like there has to be some sort of balance between throwing the book and the wall and the shelf at everyone and also just not prosecuting. I mean, I don't want a prosecutor not to prosecute. I would just prefer the prosecutors did not charge stack and, sentence someone for committing one act of maybe jaywalking with also like, reckless endangerment and public disorder and like slapping all these different charges on this person for one act, which, that's not fair either. That's not justice either. So.
Well, I think that's what it boils down to. Like, you cannot fight when I say domestically, meaning in your county or the smaller things, like what you're talking about, you still have to go to war with these Goliaths. The Rashad Brooks cases, the Ahmaud Arbery cases. If they're in your privy, that's another way you set precedent to say, hey, she tried this case, he tried this case. This is what they came up from. It's another champion for the people opportunity. Yeah. So you can't just fry the small fish. You got to fry the big ones too. And I think that's my concern now. So, okay, are you guys scared to fight the big fights? Because they set actually they set a bigger precedent because, the Rashad Brooks and the Ahmaud Arbery, the world saw these cases. So if you can go in, even if you don't win, but you go in and swipe away some of the things that people have been getting away with, at least you've done something. Mm-hmm. So you cannot just try the small fish. You got to get the big ones too. And I don't want to see this trend where we're trying to slide these things off to other folks because you don't know who hands they're going to end in. Because I can promise you,
the people can't control that.
Exactly. The evil folks have no problem going to war. It's, us good folks, that we got to really step up and say, hey, it's time. I'm going to try it. I may not win, but I'm going after this, and this. because I want to make sure that this, and this never happens again. In this case, can set the precedent that those little small things never happen again. Yeah. So even if they got to look at it that way, hey, look at how you got to look at it, but you got to try it.
I agree. And
you got to try it.
Well said. No, well said. But I believe in a future world, I just believe there should be no parties for these types of offices. I think half of the problem that's created is that we could have a Democratic sheriff or a Republican sheriff. We could have a Democratic DA or a Republican DA. The point of a DA is if something pops off where I am and something happens to me that somebody can fight for me. I'm a victim, right? So I shouldn't have to hire an attorney to get justice for something that I didn't ask for. I need somebody in there who's going to fight on my behalf as a citizen. That's what the DA is supposed to be there to do. That should not be a Republican way to do it or a Democratic way to do it. And same thing with the sheriff. There shouldn't be a Republican way to do it or a Democratic way to do it. I think a big part of the problem is that these offices just don't need to be partisan offices at all. And people should just let the records speak for themselves.
Yeah, they definitely should be nonpartisan positions because, I mean, like, what does party affiliation have to do with you?
Right. Like, are you my sheriff or are you, like it just doesn't make sense.
The law is a law. So if that law is broken, therefore, it's your job to prosecute on behalf of that law.
Exactly.
So I'm just like, whether you're a Republican or Democrat, that should not have any type of, salience when you're trying to actually do your job.
And I also think it can create a lot of problems because people tend to just vote down the line, vote down the party line.
I'm not going to lie, I do it. If I don't know who's running, I typically just vote Democrat.
I know.
It's problematic simply because, like, I find it problematic simply because I am not a party voter. I'm an issue voter. So I usually vote on, like, issues that candidates are, like, lobbying for, candidates are, like, involved with. So I wouldn't necessarily just vote all Democrat just because I want to see blue in a house or something. I would vote based off the issues or what, like as far as the house is concerned, I vote off what committees are, are you a part of? What committees are you seeking to run for? Things like that.
Yeah.
See, you're not a status
The reasons it can be tough, though, is because
we don't need status quo anymore.
We
saw where status quo got us.
Everybody,
we saw where status quo. People
Agreed.
literally told me that they did not agree with everything that Trump had did or said, but yet they still voted for him just simply because he's a Republican. And that was very problematic,
which is questionable.
But the same thing goes the other way. And there is a judge in particular, I'll say Judge Malone. I'll go ahead.
I was about to say, you already said it now.
Yeah. In Clayton County, who's a Superior Court judge. There are obviously many Democratic Superior Court judges who is one of the harshest and most cruel individuals I've ever seen on the bench in terms of how she speaks to people, how she deals with people, the callousness with which she hands down her sentences, and the toughness of her sentences. And quite frankly, I think a lot of people who would just imagine going down that ballot, I think if people knew everyone's record, they wouldn't just assume, well, because that person's a Democrat, that they have my interest at hand. I assure you that's not the case. And the same goes the other way. There's some very liberal Republicans in office as well that, I'm sure Trump supporters would not have loved to know that.
Well, I think that's also the other thing, too. It's like before Flynn came and really explained what a DA does, I didn't know they controlled a lot of that stuff he said. I didn't know that. So if I didn't know it, I have doggone 4 degrees almost. I can imagine what the average Joe does not know. So I think that's the thing, too. That's why when we start having guests, explain what you do in detail so that folks understand why it matters that you're in office. Because a lot of times we don't know. We don't know, that I didn't know the DA sets all that stuff. I didn't know that. And I should because my undergrad was political science, but that was a long time ago. So I really didn't, pay any attention to it. So I think that's another issue. We don't know what these people do and, the reach that they have as it pertains to your everyday life. And that everyday life might not be you, but if Pookie's always in and out of jail, Pookie's sentencing is being set by the DA that's, in charge of your district. They probably don't know that. That's a direct correlation to you and your family. And sometimes we have to frame it that way, that, hey, you may not go to jail, but Pookie's staying in and out of jail. And if you want Pookie to get lighter sentences, it's set, by such and such who's in charge in your district.
Yeah.
Speaking of sentencing, are we going to touch probation reform?
Oh, yeah. Thank you for bringing that up.
Oh, you ain't got
so
long.
SB okay, really quickly, SB 105, this is a very important issue to me. 1 out of every 15 Georgians, this is a really important number, is on under correctional control. So that's probation, parole. The average in the United States is 1 out of 55. So we have 4 times more people on correctional control than any other state, hand over fist. And it's not because Georgians commit more crimes. It's just because our sentences are very, very long. There are people that I've met through my work with Reform Alliance who've been on probation for 25 years, 30 years, 40 years, who have a 10-year sentence for a first-time nonviolent offense. It happens all the time. And probation is essentially jail outside of jail. So it is You have no Fourth Amendment rights. You're subject to search and seizure at any given moment. Every pay stub you make has to be sent to your probation officer, who also has the right to call your job and ask if you're there at any given moment. Makes it very difficult to obtain employment and secure employment.
And the money.
Nobody really wants that.
And the money.
Yeah, that is well.
That's the
Fines,
big part.
fees,
Yes.
restitution, anything else that's required of you. Now, in most states, there's a cap on probation. 36 states have a cap that after 3 years, because statistically speaking, 90% of people who are going to commit another crime, meaning they're going to recidivate, will do so within the first 18 months. 90% of people, black, white, brown, male, female, that first 18 to 24 months will basically tell you if this person is capable of change at this time. And yet, so most states cap probation. We do not. So we've got people on there for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, long after by 7 years, this person is no more likely to commit a crime than somebody who never has for any reason. So it's a very long time to keep somebody under those restrictions and to not let them get back to their life. So SB 105, Senator Brian Strickland, who is in South Metro, Henry County, has sponsored this bill and is championing this bill, as is Reform Alliance and a bipartisan group. And we made it through committee unanimously this past week, which is really exciting. So moving on, moving on to rules. This will help 50,000 people who are done, who have paid their fines, paid their fees. You know, these are not the big scary people that, you know, the news media will try to warn you about, or that, you know, places like the Washington Examiner will report about. These are people who have made small mistakes, who have paid for those mistakes, who just cannot get off probation because the laws are not, the process is not allowing them to do it. There's supposed to be a legal way that they can get off probation. Hasn't been happening. So this could help thousands and thousands of people keep their money in their pockets and just actually move on. So
I wonder how much of that parole money goes to the government. Like to do, because I know that's going to be the argument.
At this level, it does go to the state. So like there's misdemeanor probation, which Georgia uses a lot. Big issue, whole nother issue we should definitely talk about at some point. The private companies do manage that. But at this level, we're talking about the state. So.
Oh, okay. That's a shame. I don't think third parties should be controlling stuff that pertains to government, because then you get into contracts.
I would agree.
And biases and all kinds of people. I would agree. And you'd be amazed at how those people look and what they look like when you do an audit on these third parties that work with government. That's a whole nother story. Don't get me started on that foolishness too.
Yes.
But I digress. I was gonna get some entertainment news. I don't think I have any.
No entertainment news?
I don't think so. Nothing really stood out.
Can we do a levity then before we leave?
A what?
Levity, like a levity topic, a light topic.
I mean, we got like 2 minutes left.
Heavy stuff. Oh, go ahead.
We got like 2 minutes. Well, I guess shouts out to Cardi B. You know, I do like Cardi B. I ain't gonna front, I do. For Up being like number 2. Oh. So it gives her like her 10th, almost like number 1 or top 10 in her career, which is big for a female rapper. So shouts out to her. I do like Cardi. I'm not gonna front. I didn't like Up until I listened to it again. I was like, oh, this kind of hot. This got a little, nice little ditty. So, you know, shouts out to Cardi B for that. Apparently there's been this whole beef thing. Well, not really a beef, but people looking at Ciara and Russell versus Ciara and Future, and guys saying, yeah, y'all want a Russell, but you really want a Future. So that's become a whole topic that I see trending on Twitter, and I was like, that's interesting. I mean, somebody did a meme and put Russell in one and put Future in one. Was like, y'all say y'all want this, but you'll go for this first. And I was like, that is kind of interesting, because it's a thing. It's a thing. So that's been a big discussion. You know, do women really want bad boys? But they say they want good boys. It's been an age-old topic.
I feel like there's not enough straight women here to attest to that.
That's why I didn't really get into it. That's why I threw it out there. I really didn't get into it. But I'm just saying. So I mean, that's the thing. So.
But congrats, sir.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. But outside of that, I think that was pretty much all the things that we wanted to cover today. So. Look, we gave y'all some information to pay attention to, because that's what we do. So, final thoughts, Cam? From the resident tree hugger. That's what I'm starting to name you, the resident tree hugger. The resident tree hugger.
Well, I guess just on the topic of probation reform, just to kind of like sum up what she was saying, like 40% of probation sentences in Georgia exceed like 10 years, which is very extreme to an extent. So it's just that not like clearly almost half of these probation sentences are going way over way over the expected timeline of there to be like the probability of no crime basically reoccurring from that person. So I just find it very predatory on people who are like funneled in and out of the prison system. I find it a way to just keep the prison system and the prison industrial complex pumping, so that, you know, prisoners can be used as servants, because you have no 14th Amendment rights while you're on probation or while you belong to the state. So I just find it very problematic, and that just goes to display my dissent of private prisons and the whole prison industrial complex and using people for profit. So yeah, that's just my last sentences.
That was a lot.
That was perfect. So I have nothing to say. So I have nothing to say because I think I want that. Copy and paste. That's what I have to say.
I concur. I just want us to really start. Well, we will, but definitely start having more conversation about what's on the books and how people are being held captive by laws that may not be enforced, but they're still written and they can be enforced at any time. So we need to start having more conversation about that kind of stuff. This citizens arrest crap, this probation foolishness. We need to start having real conversations about this stuff because this stuff really affects our communities. And even though it doesn't affect a lot of us directly, it affects our families indirectly because we do have friends and family members who may be a little trouble-ridden, who may be in and out of jail or on probation. Yeah. Well, they shouldn't be subjugated to that for the rest of their lives. So, but we're going to have those. We're going to continue to have those conversations. And on next Friday, we can get real funky when Maya will be back with us. Maya Dillon Smith will be back on with us next Friday. Y'all know how she gets. So it's going to be a real fun time on the Leadership Blend Live podcast with your host, Ricardo D. Rice.